Hey everyone, excited to bring this podcast to you, and I named it My Greatest Fear. I try to be super transparent as I share these, and I know they kind of burn your hide every once in a while. They burn mine too, but God uses these things to make us more like Him, which is the goal of why we're on this planet, is to be like Jesus Christ. Because when He's in us in power, He says when He's lifted up, He will draw people to Himself. Lord have mercy, don't let me lift myself up. That ain't gonna do nothing for nobody. So join me. In the Old Testament, we read of a king named Saul. God chose him to be the first king of Israel. The prophet Samuel anointed him and prophesied about his immediate future. He told him minute details of the next few hours, and then there's a scripture where he told him something kind of mind-blowing. It's 1 Samuel 10, 6 and 7. This is what Samuel said to Saul: "The Spirit of the Lord will come powerfully upon you, and you will prophesy with them, and you will be changed into a different person. Once these signs are fulfilled, do whatever your hand finds to do, for God is with you." It happened exactly as Samuel told him. Once the Spirit of God came upon Saul, I mean, it was kind of like the day of Pentecost. It was incredible. He was just this humble man, and all of a sudden God's Spirit came upon him, and he went out and was amazing for God for a little while. And when Samuel said, "Do whatever your hand finds to do, for God is with you," it reminds me of a quote from St. Augustine. He said, "Love God and do whatever you please." That quote sounds blasphemous at first, but it's not. It's one of the most powerful and freeing truths on the planet. God meant for His children to be one thing while we walk this planet. He meant for us to be full of His love, and He meant for us to be free. Galatians 5:11 says, "So Christ has truly set us free. Now make sure that you stay free and don't get tied up again in slavery to the law." There is only one true being in the universe that's free, and that being is God. Only when we are one with Him do we experience freedom. We are all slaves to our flesh, our ego, and our desires until we find out what real life is. Real life is being hooked up to the source of all life and all goodness. King Saul got to experience that reality in such a dramatic way. He was blown away. He was loving, and he walked in that power for a little bit of time. Therein lies my greatest fear. Saul tasted the goodness of God, he tasted the freedom of God, and he tasted the power of God. God exalted him to the highest position in Israel. People adored him. People followed him. And he quickly became addicted to power and position over the presence of the living God. What we can taste, touch, see, smell, and feel are temptations to every single one of us. What I've noticed in both Scripture and real life is most people do not finish well. No matter how strong God's presence is in a person, they often still harden up toward God and start on a downward spiral from which they never recover. To follow hard after God until we die takes a tremendous amount of effort. And it's not an effort to stay in His good favor. Jesus' blood took care of all of that. It's an effort to keep Him as our single focus. I know in the Old Testament, God would start a fire. They would offer everything, and God would come down and consume a sacrifice with the fire. That fire was started by God, but the priests, it was their responsibility to never let the fire go out. We can't make ourselves be saved or any of that kind of stuff. God puts a fire in our soul, but it's our responsibility to make sure that fire never goes out. So it does take a tremendous effort, tremendous amount of effort and humility. Effort and humility. Two things we humans are not very good at. We tend to be both lazy, we all want an easy button, and we tend to be proud. To live in the presence of God 24/7 cannot be done without going to our own funeral. Two opposing wills cannot live in this same body. God is a gentleman. He will not. When I hear people say, oh, God will make you do this and God will make it. No, God will not. God will not force you to walk with him. It's the highest privilege on the planet, but he will not force us. It takes us deciding that we're going to go after him with our entire being. Jeremiah 29:11-14, it says, when you seek me with all your heart, you will find me. Half-hearted people are never going to walk with God. It's just the way it is. In our arrogance, we think our own wisdom is greater than what God says in his word. I've experienced it in my own heart, and I see it all the time. God has written his heart down in the Bible. It tells us every single thing we need to know about how to live life on earth and how to know and experience the God of the universe. This is not rocket science. Most of the Bible is pretty cut and dried. When people tell me, oh, I can't understand the Bible, I can tell you for sure they ain't reading it. Because about 95% of the Bible, I mean, you can read it and understand a lot of it. The Holy Spirit has to take us deep into inner meaning, but they act like they're reading a foreign language. It's not. It's written in English, and you can get an easy English translation. And if you're a Christian, you've got the writer of the Bible inside of you. I think of it like this. I've written a book, and I've told this to people before. If you were reading my book and I was sitting beside of you on the couch and you read a passage in my book and you're like, I really don't understand that. And I was sitting there, how foolish would it be if you didn't say, what did you mean by this? Well, that's what we've got inside of us. We've got the Spirit of God that moved men to write the Bible. So we have the author inside of us to help us understand what it says. Whew. If you're not in it, you're missing out on the reason you're on the planet. Even if the 10 Commandments were all we had to go by, most of our troubles would disappear. God's mind is beyond comprehension, and his words are beautiful. Yet we try our best to twist them to accommodate our sin and rebellion. We try to please God and ourselves, and we think it will work. I promise you, it will not, and it will not end well. Our desires and God's desires are not even in the same universe. Our desires and wisdom are selfish at best, demonic at worst. Listen to James 3:13-15. Who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in humility that comes from wisdom. But listen to this big but, because usually what God actually means will come after the but. But if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, most of us don't go around saying, I'm bitter and I'm envious and I'm very selfishly ambitious. It says if you harbor it, you kind of hide it in your heart. He said, don't boast about it or deny the truth. Such wisdom does not come down from heaven, but it is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. None of us should deny our bitter envy and selfish ambition. We all have it, 100% of us. And if you're sitting there thinking, oh, I don't have any of it, yes, you do. You just don't understand it. I've got it. I sit and I'll read my Bible in the morning and I'll do things, or I'll look on Facebook and I'll feel something rise up in me and I'll say, God, get this junk out of me. I don't want any of it in me. And what we either do is we boast about it or we deny it. We say things like we're going to conquer the world, or we try to act like we actually are humble and don't care. And both those attitudes are straight from hell. I remember being a guest speaker at a small church years ago. I sat through the Sunday school class with some ladies, and one of them spoke up about the lesson and expressed how much she didn't want any glory at all about anything she did. Well, I spoke up in that Sunday school class as a guest and said, I wanted all the glory and how I have to regularly beg God to help me with it because I'm so proud. They all looked at me like I had 3 heads. I have sat in the presence of God long enough to want to be repulsed by my own bitter envy and selfish ambition. I can't get that crap out of me, but I can expose it to God and others. And listen to that, to God and others. We'll expose anything to God. We don't want to expose it to others. What does that say about us? That we don't care to tell the perfect God of the universe things about ourselves, but we fear others. That right there is a huge red flag, and I've got it too. We can expose it to God and others and beg God to deliver us from ourselves. C.S. Lewis hit the nail on the head. If anyone would like to acquire humility, I think, tell him the first step. The first step is to realize that one is proud. And it's a big step too. At least nothing whatever can be done before that. If you think you're not conceited, it means you are very conceited indeed. I use that quote all the time because nobody says it better. All of us have a King Saul in us. We want to save face, look good to everyone around us, and steal the glory of the living God. When I read of him and I see his hard heart, I want God to do whatever it takes to keep me in his presence. I don't trust myself as far as I can throw myself, and at my current size, that would probably be about 2 or 3 inches, and neither should you. It doesn't take much to get a hard heart. As soon as our hearts turn to anything on this planet other than God, and I'm going to say that again, as soon as our hearts turn to anything on this planet other than God, it starts to cool down and harden up. King Saul lost everything because of his bitter envy of David and his selfish ambition as king. God gladly gave him everything he needed at the beginning and would have continued to exalt and bless him. King Saul made the mistake most people who don't finish well make. He wanted God's gifts more than he wanted God's presence. When he sinned, he said something chilling to the prophet Samuel. Then Saul pleaded again. Listen to him. He admits he sinned, but listen to how he confessed it. I know I've sinned, but please at least honor me before the elders of my people and before Israel by coming back with me so I may worship the Lord your God. He wasn't a bit interested in God. He was interested in himself by that point. Samuel became nothing more to Saul than an avenue of God's blessing. Saul only confessed his sins so he could get Samuel to exalt him before the people. He even admitted that God was Samuel's God, not his. He didn't care. He was all about Saul by that time. And remember, God's Spirit came powerfully upon him and changed him to a different person, and that's where his pride sent him. I counsel many people, and I always ask them about their prayer life and time in the Word. It's not to make anybody feel guilty or put them on the spot. I happen to know that God's presence is our only hope. We long for peace and we long for joy on our terms. We want our dignity and we want Jesus. Jesus lost his dignity for us as he hung naked on the cross. And do you know why he hung naked? For me and for you. We're the ones that have the shame, but he was before God on a cross because of our shame. How dare we want our dignity when he didn't get to keep his? If we are not willing to expose ourselves to God and others as we really are, we will never know what it means to walk in his glory. My worst fear is that I would turn from God and end up with a hard heart. It takes a small turning, a half obedience, a lust that we must have satisfied, and before we know it, we are stone cold and unaffected. We no longer hear him or have a desire to seek him. I have felt this, I have experienced it in my own heart, and it was the most terrifying and is the most terrifying thing that I've ever been through, and I hope it always terrifies me. No wonder God said something over and over and over and over in Scripture. We should listen to him. It's Hebrews 3:15, and just has been said, today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as you did in the rebellion. God forbid we hear him speak, decide to ignore what he said, and go our own way. It is the beginning of a bad ending, and we don't have to have a bad ending.